my experience is that 99% of people likely are avoiding their own destiny. They're actually, my belief is that God, the creator, universal intelligence, whatever you want to call it, the grand designer, is constantly trying to save us. And we constantly resist the call to actually heal ourselves. And it's a very fascinating aspect of psychology when you get into the psychology of healing or the psychology of detoxification, because it's essentially the same conversation. It's this resistance to answering a call that's like an impulse from our soul. And I believe that it can be very difficult to identify that call because we have spent so much time in our life medicating and sedating that impulse to the point where, I just feel like we don't trust ourselves as a society. And that's how consumerism persists, I believe, is because we're not actually trusting our own power to make our own decisions and to create the life of our dreams. So essentially, we suppress that calling for however long until it becomes kind of a foreign memory, and then we have to have an experience that shocks us out of apathy. It shocks us out of, it kind of exhausts the resistance to the point where, like, you might lose a loved one, or you who's listening, or any of us might have something that's so shocking that actually sobers us in a way. We think of sobriety as like getting off alcohol or something. I think sobriety is actually getting off the hypnotic spell of, a life that we weren't meant to live.
This is episode 15 of the Ownstream podcast featuring Ronnie Landis.
Welcome to the Ownstream podcast. So glad you're with us this week. I'm Theresa I.
And I'm Stephen Shelley. And yes, thanks so much for joining us. This is a very exciting episode for us because when we began thinking about the Ownstream podcast months ago, and it's unbelievable that we've got already 15 episodes, but we had a list of people that we wanted to meet and talk to and reach out to. Many of those conversations have happened. Many are coming. But this week's guest, Ronnie Landis, is somebody we actually met through total coincidence in Sedona a couple of months ago. And Theresa, why don't you tell us that story? Yeah,
so we were getting out of town because we've been really feeling like we were in some routine here. Me kind of doing my day job and just in a routine. And we wanted to get away and have a real, inspiring weekend. And so we went away to Sedona, and we'd had a great drive, and Sophia had done great with her napping. And we, kind of right before we had to put her to bed, we ran into this raw cafe in Sedona. And right away, Stephen said, "Hey, I think I know that guy." And they had, they seated us right next to each other, basically, like tables a foot away from each other. And anyway, we started talking. This was Ronnie, and it was like really, the synchronicity, the coincidence really helped us. That feeling of magic, and we're in the right place and we're on the right path, was with us right from the beginning of Sedona, thanks to meeting Ronnie. And we saw him there a few more times, had some really inspiring conversations. And right away there was a connection. He then handed us his book, and we started reading it that weekend, and we're very inspired by the way he talks about being called to do the work that he does. We spent the weekend talking about the work that we want to do with people around their calling, and then it leapt off the page. He's somebody who has a very, very clear mission and focus, and that comes forth in talking to him.
And he's uncompromising about it in all the best ways. I think one thing that stands out to me about Ronnie, having now just known him a couple of months, is how he's always the same. He never seems to be, flying high or super down. He's always like solid and seems to me a man on a mission. And the name of his book is the Holistic Health Mastery Program, and it delves deeply into things like raw food and cleansing and micronutrients and all these different ways that you can transform your body. And he's one of the few people, although I'm not deep, nor I don't think Theresa would be either, in the raw food world, but he's one of the few people in our reality who very, very clearly makes the point that your health, your body, and your diet not only help you feel better, help you live longer, help you quote unquote live better, but they actually are a catalyst towards transformation. And many people get frustrated on the path of transformation. It's too hard, or the resistance is too hard, whatever invented excuses arise. But Ronnie provides a very clear framework for transforming the diet and therefore transforming your life. And it's very potent, very powerful. His arguments are very, very compelling. And our diet has radically changed since we met him, since we've read his book. We've now explored other people who advocate in a similar way. I wouldn't say we're fully raw, but we do eat much, much more healthy food than we used to.
Yeah, and the great thing about his book is he talks about cleansing and streamlining down to the most essential in so many different areas of your life. So that's related to the relationships you have and the technology you consume, the media you consume, and as well as your diet. So it's really like going raw, going natural, going to a divine type of experience, and really like stripping away the unnecessary so that you can be as pure in your life experience, I think, as possible. And that comes through in this conversation. That comes through when you talk to Ronnie. And like Stephen said, we eat I think what many would consider a pretty healthy diet. We eat a vegan, a whole food, plant-based diet. So, a lot of vegetables and just, not a lot of added fats, not a lot of sugar. And but now, and this has been certainly really intuitive to me for a while, wanting more raw elements to my diet. Just like Stephen knows, I took a road trip once cross country and was eating like raw vegetables out of a cooler. Like, it's just something that's been attractive to me for a long time. But we've been now, we switched to a raw breakfast now. We eat salads every day for lunch, and are adding raw elements to our dinners too. So we're trending in that direction, and it feels great.
One little story I'll share with you, and then we'll get into the interview, because Ronnie has a lot of things to say. And again, I think he's very, very clear, and it's a special time on the planet. And I think Ronnie is really somebody out at the leading edge of delivering a very clear message about what our responsibilities are, and a new way of life that beckons. But I think one of the times that we met him in Sedona, I asked him if he was going to this marketing conference in San Diego that was set to take place a few weeks after that. And he looked at us and he said, "Is that one of those like sales and funnels conferences?" And I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what it is." He said, "Oh, that sounds terrible." And I thought to myself, I said, "That really does sound terrible." And it was that exchange that catalyzed me into looking more deeply into my own thoughts about what is marketing and why do you have to market anyway. And many of you listening to this may not have any interest in marketing, and that's fine. But a lot of people who are entrepreneurs or coaches or who have online businesses think about marketing. And I think there's a new wave forming where you're not actually thinking about marketing. What you're thinking about is, what's my mission? How can I best get that mission into the world? What is the maximum amount of value I can give to this moment, to this individual, to this event, to this speaking engagement, whatever it may be? And that's credit to Ronnie. He's inspired that. And I think you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. It's way more about just food and diet, although we do talk a lot about that. Ronnie's story is great. He's a very compelling young man. And so we'll leave it at that. We'll come back afterwards to wrap up, but until then, enjoy this great interview with Ronnie Landis. Well, we first met you at in Sedona, of all places, and of course, we live about 10 minutes from each other, probably, and and I recognized you right away as somebody that I had seen before at this place we frequent in downtown Encinitas called Eve. Anyway, we started talking, and it was one of those really cool coincidences, and you ran out to your car and grabbed your book, and I know you have another book that's imminent, and so we should talk about that. We should mention that for sure in through the episode. But you gave us your book, and we went home and started reading it, and we're just like, oh my God, this is really, really powerful, really kind of right down our alley. And that's when Theresa promptly grabbed it and hasn't returned it.
Well, it was especially great because of the synchronicity, and we were all where we met you was in this really wonderful raw cafe in Sedona, and we were in Sedona to kind of recharge our direction and our work with Ownstream. It was sort of a retreat, and and we're also sort of recharging the way we were eating, and so it was really good to, I don't know, it felt like that kind of synchronicity running into you there, and good energy. So
yeah, it was amazing, and we were just sitting right next to each other too.
Yeah, I think you had even told somebody that you were visiting from Encinitas, and that's what confirmed it for me that I did actually recognize you. But so we went home and started reading, and it kind of leads into our first topic, I suppose, our first series of questions, where in the beginning of your book, and the book that we're referring to is called Holistic Health Mastery Program, A Guide to Health and Lifestyle Transformation. That's the book you gave to us, which is a fantastic book. To me, it sort of speaks to lifestyle, food, diet, everything that's interesting to us, really right at the leading edge, right at the cutting edge of kind of where that might be in its most evolved place. But in that book, you talk very beautifully about your calling and how for a period of time you denied this. And so what I think would be interesting is to sort of hear about who you were, what your life was like before that, and then we'll get into what happened then and then kind of what it has done through you, let's say, since that time. So maybe start by talking about kind of who you were, what your life was like before that special moment.
Sure, yeah. So my life was pretty much based around athletics and martial arts. I was raised as a martial artist since the age of 4, and also as an athlete. And I competed both in basketball and in Taekwondo for most of my life. And I was paralleling a professional career in both arenas. And yeah, that was pretty much everything to me. And I had no aspirations of doing anything else other than maybe little side businesses or developing a business around Taekwondo or around, athletic training and something of that nature. And then when I was 23 years old, I was overcoming my second knee surgery. I had my first knee surgery when I was 19 years old, and I was spending years rehabilitating and starting to slowly change my lifestyle and my diet and upgrade just my awareness around food and food consciousness, and starting to learn about whole foods, learning about organic food, learning about more plant-based nutrition. And it started slowly for me, and I just wanted to utilize that as a way to increase sports performance. And then through a different series of synchronicities and different changing trajectories in my life where my pursuit as an athlete was starting to wane and things were starting to change with me in my life, I just got opened up to this other possibility of becoming a fully fledged nutritionist and a public speaker and a writer. And that just took a hold of me. It just created a life of its own. It created an obsession to learn about nutrition, an obsession to learn about this body, how it works, how I can fuel it for optimum performance, how I can heal myself of all the inflammation and all the chronic issues that I was dealing with from wear and tear as an athlete. And from there, I just had a complete metamorphosis of just going through my own nutrition journey, getting into plant-based nutrition, getting into raw living foods, getting into green vegetable juicing, getting into superfood smoothies, all of it. And it literally changed my whole body. It freed all the inflammation up in my body. I completely healed my knee injuries, all that. I never had to ice my knees ever again. It was just a complete transformation. It also transformed my consciousness. It transformed my conscious awareness of the environment. I became more environmentally aware. I became more aware of things like factory farming and the inhumane treatment of animals worldwide. Specifically going into slaughterhouses to be slaughtered for basically consumerism, just to consume the cadavers of dead animals, which now seems like the weirdest thing in the world to me. But back then, it's just kind of like, wow, okay, this is interesting. I never really put that much consideration into that whole situation. But then just one thing after another started to reveal itself to me. And it just took on a life of its own. And one day I just decided, this is my life. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do with my life. And I just jumped full in.
We're definitely going to dig more into a lot of that in terms of your health and food and what's going on in our society now. We want to pause for a minute and ask you if you could tell us a little more about, what that call felt like. How did you know it was a calling? What did that feel like? And how did you answer it? Because we think of, a number of our listeners are folks who may feel that call, but deny it,
yes.
And you talk about that in your book too, that people often deny that call, and so how did it feel and how did you answer it?
Yeah, first of all, my experience is that 99% of people likely are avoiding their own destiny. They're actually, my belief is that God, the creator, universal intelligence, whatever you want to call it, the grand designer, is constantly trying to save us. And we constantly resist the call to actually heal ourselves. And it's a very fascinating aspect of psychology when you get into the psychology of healing or the psychology of detoxification, because it's essentially the same conversation. It's this resistance to answering a call that's like an impulse from our soul. And I believe that it can be very difficult to identify that call because we have spent so much time in our life medicating and sedating that impulse to the point where, I just feel like we don't trust ourselves as a society. And that's how consumerism persists, I believe, is because we're not actually trusting our own power to make our own decisions and to create the life of our dreams. So essentially, we suppress that calling for however long until it becomes kind of a foreign memory. And then we have to have an experience that shocks us out of apathy. It shocks us out of, it kind of exhausts the resistance to the point where, like, you might lose a loved one, or you might have, who's listening, or any of us might have something that's so shocking that actually sobers us in a way. We think of sobriety as like getting off alcohol or something. I think sobriety is actually getting off the hypnotic spell of, a life that we weren't meant to live. Essentially. So for me, what that felt like was, it was like my cages were being rattled. You guys still there?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. By the way, we have a little construction going on outside, and for people listening, you might hear a little chainsaw. So we're muting ourselves while you're talking, just so we're not layering that over what you're saying.
That's what that was. Okay, cool.
No problem though. Keep going. This is really great.
Yeah. So for me, the visceral feeling was, the best way I could say it for everybody is that I was so consumed at this point in my journey. I transferred from being an Olympic hopeful in Taekwondo to giving a professional career in basketball one more shot. And I spent 3 years really pursuing that career vigilantly. And I just remember my first year on raw living food. And we're talking about like going 100% raw food, 100% vegan, 100% raw food. And I went through like some intense detox. I started losing weight. I was thinning out. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like eating fruit out of the market. I didn't know what I was doing. had no real guidance or anything, but it just felt like what was calling me. And so the calling was just like, the small part of the calling was like just eating more like raw food. It just felt like the thing to do. It's like, I can't explain it other than that. It was just like going to the market and just eating as much fruit and like vegetables as I could. And I felt this like pull to start doing that. But then the big awakening for me was when I was in a basketball training session, and I went up to my coach, who was preparing me to actually try out for the semi-professional basketball team a week from this moment. And I went up to him and I said, I don't really know what's happening to me right now, but all I can say is that I don't feel the same passion and the same fire that I had before. And I don't think I can actually compete with these guys because the fire isn't there anymore. And I can't do it. And he was reluctant, but he kind of understood where I was coming from, and something deep inside of me was shifting. And that was the moment I embarked on a much deeper spiritual direction. That was the moment I just really thrusted myself into the unknown. And I just decided that I was going to start writing books, and I was going to start studying nutrition like a professional. I was going to go so deep into it and make this my vocation. And I started like leading lectures at like raw vegan potlucks and just anywhere I could. And then eventually I got deep into the Bay Area raw food and vegan and vegetarian communities. And then I started putting on like raw chocolate events and parties and anywhere I could speak and just kind of get my voice out there and start practicing my oratorical skills as a speaker. And that's just how it started for me. And from there, I just kept following the calling. I have so many stories of so many synchronicities and so many callings along the way. But ultimately, it's always been a visceral impulse within me that comes into my body. It comes around my chest. And it's usually when I feel very nervous, I feel uncertain. And there's also a bit of excitement that undertones that nervousness. And I feel like that nervousness is essentially part of the ego dying away. And it's resisting, it's holding on for dear life. It's the old identity structures that we've created for ourselves to stay comfortable. And it's the discomfort of a new state of evolution, I think, that's trying to emerge through us. And so that's where that anxiety or that discomfort comes from. But underneath it, it's a real calling because there's this sense of excitement that accompanies it. If you just kind of breathe into it and you're still with it, then I feel like that's what it's always felt like for me anyways. So,
and one quick follow-up on that. Was there ever a time during that period where you had to kind of assert yourself maybe or come out, if you will, to the old part of your life? I think that's often a challenge. It's something that's been challenging for me, like with family or friends or people that I've known before back east or what have you, people that kind of identify me with, in your case at least, the basketball player or the martial artist, and now suddenly like, whoa, no, he's like doing something entirely different. Yeah. Was that a moment for you? Was there a time where you like sort of came out, if you will, in that way as this kind of new person on a new path?
You know what? That's a great question. I don't think there was any one moment that I can recall. There were a number of really powerful moments along the journey. For me, it was just the accumulation, it's persistence. Like every single day I would go out there and I would stretch myself. I would do uncomfortable things. So it's hard to put my finger on like one moment, but there were many times where I had to reconcile certain parts of my past, certain skeletons in the closet, or old conversations that never came full circle. And a lot of those conversations never did come full circle. A lot of things I had to leave a lot by the wayside. And that's just kind of how I am. I just go. I just get because I realize this life is very fragile. It's very finite, and I don't really have the energy, patience, or the bandwidth to kind of like wait around. I just go, and then I feel like things will line up along the way. And I've had some incredible synchronicities, even recently, of a situation between me and a woman that I almost got married to, with and her 2 children. And I had a situation where you could never have predicted it. It was the most unexpected situation where I actually bumped into her now 20-year-old daughter. And we hadn't seen each other in like 8 years or something. And that was a situation that never got fully resolved. And, one of those conversations that I kind of regretted for a while. But then we bumped into each other in Santa Cruz while I was visiting a dear friend of mine. And she didn't, Leia, my ex's daughter, she didn't even live in Santa Cruz. So it was like the most and we bumped into each other walking along the street. Wow. So it was the most it was like one of those moments where like your faith is restored. It's like, wow, we do not live in an atheistic reality. We live in some kind of reality where there is some kind of presence that is weaving these things together in such a perfect way that it just kind of restores your faith in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to talk more about this expanded notion of sobriety you're talking about. So, you talk about detoxing or, becoming sober from a variety of influences in life that are intoxicating us, keeping us asleep, limited, false notions of self in this society. Can you talk a little bit about how, and you do in your book a little, about how the world around us is currently set up to as an obstacle to personal transformation and to fully realizing ourselves, and then also, what is essential to detoxification and to sobriety from that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I really believe that most people are walking around intoxicated by a hypnotic spell of mediocrity. And they're so consumed by mediocrity as culture has imposed it upon us, in the way that we go about our life, in the way that we go about this like linear, static 1+1 kind of approach to life. Like you're born, you go to kindergarten, you go to first grade, you go to junior high, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, and then you die, right? Like this kind of linear approach to life where everything is mathematically figured out. The trajectory is figured out for you, and you basically are trying to predict every next step. And I feel like that is a very, very surefire way to living a mediocre life. And I don't mean mediocre in the sense of judgment. I don't mean it in the sense of like, oh, my life is better than someone else's. I mean it in the sense of not exercising our full capabilities for what our potential is in this incarnation, what our potential as human beings are, in our unique potential and our unique capacity to actually exercise the gifts that we were given in a way that benefits humanity, in a way that benefits life on the planet, in a way that benefits other people, beyond just like making money and paying the bills kind of thing. So that's kind of that's one level of it is the intoxication having to do with money, having to do with our ideas around money and how we enslave ourselves in order to simply, live above our means. Like if you look at the word job, it's an acronym for just over broke.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, actually.
You hadn't heard that?
No.
Yeah, so there's all these little booby traps in our language, and we don't really think about it. But yeah, if you look at the word job, it's just over broke. That to me, that's a booby trap. And so the reality, reality is very permeable. Once you get on a certain nutrition strategy and you start to experiment with different things, that upgrade your mind or upgrade your lifestyle or free you up of all the stagnation in the physical body, reality starts to get a little more permeable, and you realize, wow, I don't have to live with shackles on my legs. I can actually create my perfect day. Let's just start there. Like, what does my perfect day look like? The work that I do with a lot of my personal coaching clients and some of my group coaching programs is really helping people liberate themselves from their own limited imagination. Because then you ask someone a question like that, like, what does your perfect day look like? And they start rattling off all these almost like excuses why they can't have their perfect day. It's like, wait a minute. I didn't ask you why you can't have what you want. I just asked you what you want. And there's like this deep resistance or reluctance to fully declare one's genuine desire because they actually were never given permission to do it. They don't believe in themselves. They their level of self-worth and value has been dramatically diminished. And there's a process of rebuilding our own identity, and not our identity around how society sees us, but our identity around who do we want to be? Like, do you realize that you can be a superhero? Mm-hmm. Like, that's not just like a movie. Like, the reason you are inspired by a movie or inspired by a lecture or inspired by anything is because you are coming into spirit whenever you are, like if you watch a movie or something or hear a great lecture and it inspires you and it moves you, it's telling you something about you. Mm-hmm. So it's that one level of, in a nutshell, I feel like the sobriety piece, on one level has to do with getting back into a magical reality and more of an enchanted reality. And we are intoxicated with the disenchanted propaganda, I would say.
Yeah. So let's, this is a perfect inflection point to kind of then dive into food and raw food and your views about food's role in transformation. And I think that was the thing that struck me, one of the few things that struck me in at least the first portions of your book that I read about food as an active component to a transformational process or journey. Something that, and I've been studying personal development, self-improvement, spirituality, that whole world. I've been looking at it for over 20 years, and I've never seen anybody talk about that as a direct thing. A lot of people focus on food as just healing the body and feeling better, and sure, I'm on board with that. But you're making a direct connection from food to kind of evolving and expressing our highest self and doing the highest good that we can do in the world in a very direct way, not as part of a big equation or Rubik's Cube, but as like, no, this is part of that and a direct part of that. Talk about that and talk about food's role in transformation, number one, and number two, get specific about the kind of food, the kind of diet we should be eating.
Absolutely. That's great. So yeah, a huge part of my work is actually this cross connection between you are what you think about and you are what you eat. And we have those two phrases that we understand, but we hadn't really put them together yet. There's a great quote that comes out of the Upanishads, which is a great kind of spiritual text that comes out of India. And the phrase is, the subtle energies of your food become your mind. And this is actually known in all great kind of pseudo-religious spiritual traditions in the Eastern mysticism, Eastern spirituality, that what you consume actually donates energetic imprints that are affecting our mind, that are affecting our consciousness, that are affecting our state of being. And this is, and you could take it to a much more obvious perspective. It's very difficult to be in an attitude of gratitude if your body is chronically full of pain. Right. You can meditate all day long. However, if you have like knee inflammation, you have you have sciatica, you have, calcification in your spine, you have like this tightening around your neck or whatever the case is, you have like a heart condition, then it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to be in a constant state of gratitude. Right. And it's not totally impossible. But what I'm saying is that what if we just applied both universal principles? How far could we get in our spiritual pursuit? Because there's a lot of people that are entirely focused on spirituality, mysticism, metaphysics, and all these kind of things. And it's really a beautiful emergence of what a new society could look like. However, a lot of it is very ungrounded, in my opinion, especially being in the spiritual community for the last 10 years all around the world and just kind of checking out all the scenes. I'd say a lot of it is very ungrounded. Mm-hmm. It's illusionary in a lot of ways, in the ways that people construct fantasies that are not grounded, and they can't seem to manifest heaven on earth. They can only manifest heaven in their mind until something in their life throws them off track, or they have a health condition. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it's not heaven, is it? And so there is a practical application to spiritual ascendance. And my personal focus is this idea of inner transformation creating outer transformation. So what we put in our mouth is not just a consideration of our body, it's a spiritual consideration. Mm-hmm. It's a deep spiritual consideration at a certain point in one's journey. And that's why it is for me. That's why I will walk a vegetarian path from now till the end of my duration. And I know that for a fact. I know that that's part of my path. That may not be part of everyone's path, but for me personally, I know that for sure. So that's a consideration for me. It's a physical consideration, it's a health consideration, and it's a peace of mind consideration.
Right. And so really specifically now, when we're changing food, when we're changing from, let's call it the standard American diet, which is another acronym, SAD. But if we're eating that and we're replacing it with, say, organic vegetables and fruits and whole foods, etc., what are we actually doing, and what is happening to the body when we do that? I think that's
when we take in like higher level food. Are you saying?
Yeah, and even go so far as to say raw food. Like it's like when we're eating a raw diet. And I want to ask you in a few minutes too, kind of what your typical day of food might look like. But what are we actually changing in the body? What is that action?
Sure, that's a big conversation. One of the aspects is that whenever we cook food, we are creating a chemical disturbance on an atomic level. We are creating a molecular change in that food's chemistry. And there is a lot of different things that are happening. For example, there in a simple potato, for example, there could be up to 300 to 400 chemical changes that happen upon heat treatment, putting it in an oven or something. There could be up to 400 chemical changes happening in one potato. So it's kind of a commonsensical approach to diet and nutrition to start eating more raw living food. It doesn't mean that you turn over all the way and go completely into like 100% raw food diet. It just means you start entertaining more fresh living foods. So basically what that looks like is, raw vegetables and fruits, nuts, seeds, sunflower sprouts and sprouts of all kinds. Fermented vegetables, getting into things like roots, like ginger and turmeric and root vegetables like carrots and beets and that kind of thing. Just starting with the simple basics of really where the entire food chain comes from. Because if you think about what's natural, what's authentic, and what was originally on the earth before we started applying heat through microwaves and ovens and stoves and toasters and campfires and all this kind of thing, was raw plant food. Now, it was in a different form. It was in a wild form, which was, in a lot of cases, hard to access because of whatever the protective mechanism was, or maybe that plant didn't have as many calories and it had more what's called toxic alkaloids, so you couldn't eat enough to get your caloric needs. So the advent of heating through campfires was definitely an important discovery. However, as we progress into the next century, what we're realizing is that almost every single dis-ease and debilitation is either entirely diet and lifestyle induced, or it's heavily related to diet and lifestyle. And by changing our nutrition strategy and upgrading our basically like processed food and a high cooked food diet and an animal food diet, and reverting to a high living food diet and plant-based diet, we can actually pretty much, I'm going to say the word quote unquote reverse. However, that's basically what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. We can mitigate the inflammatory damage that is done to the body. There's a lot there. We can kind of go down the rabbit hole for what that means and more details if you want to kind of track that a little more, if you want to add more detail to it. That's the basic idea, though, is that we're kind of returning to something that's a little more natural and it's a little more normal. And my personal experience has been, when we start to do things like green vegetable juicing, like let's say adding one green vegetable juice in your day, that could be a celery, cucumber, lemon, parsley or cilantro, maybe juice up some turmeric root, maybe put in one green apple if you like a little bit of sweet. Doing that once a day will radically change somebody's experience. It'll change your state of mind because it will actually flush out a lot of the toxic byproducts that get stored up in the body. You know, every time we eat something, by the way, we create what's called waste products or metabolites. And these things build up in the body over time. And this appears to actually be the thing that ages us the quickly. It's the waste products that don't get detoxed out of the body or don't get eliminated out of the body through urination or defecation. And we need things that are going to help flush that stuff out of us. And green vegetable juice and fiber-rich foods coming from raw fruits and vegetables is extremely helpful for just kind of pulling out all the waste products. And basically the experience is that you free yourself up, and then it just lightens the load.
And I know, we could go down so many rabbit holes here with you, Ronnie, so we'll try to just pick a couple. And for those of you who are listening who might pick up Ronnie's book, it is like a real textbook on all of this. So there's fascinating lines of thought and exploration there. But I know you say in your book, just to elaborate a little on what you just said, that something to the effect of, every disease is, all diseases are the same things, and we are being, we are being confused by all the different names that are given to them. Can you just, you were getting to it a little bit there with some of what you were touching on, but can you elaborate on that for a point? Because I think people will find that really fascinating and a bit mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's a great point. So every single disease, it's not that every disease symptomologically is exactly the same thing. It just means that diabetes is not really diabetes, or cancer is not really cancer. What it is that it's a body that's toxic. So it's not like, oh, somebody has cancer. It's that you are toxic and you need to detoxify, cleanse, re-nourish yourself with the right nutrients, and the right minerals, the right vitamins, the right nutrients, the right phytonutrients, all that stuff, and detoxify the toxic waste products and the potential infections that are latent in the body And then symptoms start to dissipate over time, and with the right strategy for the right person, of course. So it's not to say that all diseases have the same exact root cause. However, the basic idea is that we identify with having diabetes. If somebody has diabetes type 1 or type 2 or whatever, they have some form of cancer or whatever the case is, oftentimes people will identify with it and it will become part of who they are because they say, oh, well, I have cancer. Yeah, have you heard that before? Like there's like, oh, I'm a cancer patient, or I have cancer. I've had cancer for 10 years. I've had diabetes. It runs in my family.
Right. Or I'm a cancer survivor. We hear that a lot too.
Right.
Which is great.
And there's a lot of pride in that, right?
A lot of identification there. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, no, you're actually a survivor from a toxic industrial era.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the idea, is that when you can simplify and recontextualize some of these commonly associated terms, it changes the experience and it changes your ability to actually create solutions or be open to solutions, because the running meme in society is that diabetes is incurable.
Right.
Or cancer is incurable. That's the running meme. So automatically people just associate, and that's what I mean by mediocrity. Mediocrity is a lack of resourcefulness. And so people just habituate to it. And so what I'm saying, again, one more time, is that it's not that somebody has a disease that's a symptom, that's a byproduct, that the root is that they are toxic.
Well, yeah, that makes so much sense, and it's so clear. And I think it's baffling only because we have been preached so much complexity and brainwashed into so much complexity throughout the course of our lives in the last 50 to 100 years. Again, that is a beckoning rabbit hole, and I'm going to transition. But I do want to, before we kind of get off of food, I'd like to hear what you typically eat through the day. Maybe just look at maybe yesterday, the day before that, as a case study. In particular, kind of what you eat when and how do you pace your meals? Are you eating 3 big meals or a different structure perhaps?
Yeah, I pretty much fast throughout the day actually nowadays. So I do like basic intermittent fasting, which looks like, on most days it looks like fasting on water for the first like 6, sometimes 8 hours of the day, depending on just how I feel. And that's something, again, you learn over raw food saturation. Because another thing about living foods and food in general that is missed on 99% of the conversations about nutrition in the world is that when you cook food, you what's the word I'm looking for? You volatilize, or you dissipate water from it. So you strip the water molecules from food as soon as you cook it. So raw food actually has living water in it. Mm-hmm. And that's a very important distinction, is that most people that are consuming 3 meals a day are actually dehydrating themselves throughout the day, and they have to drink more water. A lot of times the water people are drinking isn't very good quality either, so that furthers the dehydration. So it's just kind of this endless thing. So another thing about living food over the years, and I've been into raw food for almost a decade now, is that it actually hydrates you in a way that is different than just drinking water by itself. And that's one level. I've just been eating so much raw food over all these years, fruits and vegetables, that I just feel like I can actually just water fast whenever I want, and I love it because I just feel like a free energy generating device. I feel like a Nikola Tesla in my body. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's cool.
But that's something I've come to over many years. So what that looks like in just layman's terms is that I drink 1 liter of spring water upon waking up in the morning, and that helps flush out the waste products. That helps to rehydrate me, cleanse, get my mind clear. And then from there, I'll do a little bit of like little supplements or goodies. I like to play with activated charcoal. Activated charcoal is amazing for sponging up and just getting rid of all the metabolic toxins and any kind of environmental toxins that might be circulating in my body. I like to do little stuff like that. I'm always changing one thing out for another and playing with things. And then probably around maybe 2 or 3, I might have like a really light superfood smoothie. And that's something that covers like all my protein needs, my basic caloric needs, my fiber through like things like chia seeds and ground flax seeds and goodies like that, hemp protein, hemp seeds, all that kind of stuff. And with a little bit of like wild blueberries or raspberries or blackberries or acai, and it's something like that, a superfood smoothie. Around 2 or 3, and then around typically 6:30 to 7:30, I will have one physical meal, and that's always an ever-changing thing. But a lot of times that's just like a really big like salad, Mm-hmm. And I find over the years that I can't even get through these salads anymore. It's just like, wow, like I really don't need that much. Like I find like a lot of food actually at this point is just more entertainment and it's taste and flavor, but it's not so much like I need it anymore. I feel like I'm just like way more optimized, and I'm just trying my best to get through a meal.
Yeah.
I know, it's amazing. I know that when we've experimented, even just with portions or cleanses, we've both had that experience, though, that what you think you need can really change depending on what you're practicing, and how conscious you are. So I know that we want to, again, so much more we could talk about there, Ronnie, but I know we want to talk about your work and your business and how you work with others. So we talked at the beginning of the call about your calling and how you really you got a hunger for it and dove into it, and now you're working with others. Can you talk a little bit about how you turn that passion into a business, developed a coaching practice, and what your business looks like, what you offer to others?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So, in the first 5 years of doing all this, I was pretty much just like making a little bit of money here and there, getting by, different little business ideas or coaching people on the side to make money, whatever the case may be. But I wasn't thriving by any means. And I was just running around giving lectures all the time, writing books, doing videos, just trying to think of ways to keep building this platform and keep getting my name out to the world, because that was what was driving me. It was just like this mission of becoming this world recognized nutrition figure, and I just kept with it. No matter, I didn't make any money, great. I made money, great. It didn't matter one way or another. Yet there was like this leakage in my tank from just, not being able to support myself all the time in the way that I wanted to. So a lot of it was a faith-based mission. And then eventually I got to this place more recently over the last couple of years where I just got burnt out. And I just realized, you know what, like I really need to take this entrepreneur thing a lot more seriously, and I need to develop a financial foundation and vehicle that allows me to do what I love and also allows me to liberate myself from my own mediocrity, which at that time was mostly the financial side. And so the first thing that I did was that I took all the work that I had created in my original book, which then I eventually turned into the Holistic Health Mastery book. I created an online holistic health course, which is called the Holistic Health Mastery Program. It's a holistic health and nutrition certification course. Over 70 videos in the curriculum with 55 bonus videos. It's an amazing program that is that is out there in the world at holistichealthmastery.com. And that was the first real product besides my books that I created that really started to change that entrepreneurial direction for me. I made like $10,000 in the first couple months of applying it. And I realized, wow, okay, this is the change. This is the turn of events. This is the thing that now I can't go back.
Yeah.
You know, I can't go back to being broke again. Like I actually have to, like, you know, it was a very powerful moment for me as an infopreneur. And it showed me, it revealed a lot about my potential, you know, in terms of like providing service and being reciprocated for what I give other people. And I think that's such an important principle. And that's actually what I teach a lot of health, wellness, and visionary coaches and entrepreneurs in the personal coaching work I do, is I actually help them uncover what it is they're meant to do on the planet, and really get to this place where they know what their worth is, so they never ever are scared to ask for what they want and what they deserve, and actually to never shortchange themselves and to say no if something is not in alignment. You know, those basic things, which I find a lot of heart-centered entrepreneurs and coaches are terrified of rejection. They're terrified of saying no to somebody, and they basically bend over backwards for peanuts. And, you know, then they wonder why they're burnt out, why their health, and my health had suffered for a while too. I mean, it's going to happen if you're not being reciprocated. The universal flow of abundance cannot feed into you, because our limiting beliefs, our scarcity software is actually inhibiting that flow. And so if you think of like a unified circle, there's a continuity, right? There's a continuity and a flow to abundance and prosperity. And the only thing that holds us back from experiencing that and receiving that is actually the stories that we have about why we can't receive it, why we're not good enough, why whatever, fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. And so I did a lot of powerful work in that area. I'm still doing work to keep rising to the next level of the impact that I'm here to make on the planet and other people's lives. And that just so looks like at the moment in my coaching work, that looks like me helping to empower other really amazing coaches to make their impact even greater, as a way of creating a ripple effect way beyond my own personal impact.
Yeah, it's funny, as you're talking, I'm looking at our questions and you're kind of answering them as we're going down the page, which is good because I think we're almost out of time. I guess it's a good wrap-up question, and then we have 3 quick questions that we ask every guest, which I'm particularly interested to hear your take on. But as a wrap-up question, in your book, you talk about the necessity to strip down to nature's essence, return to nature, and obviously raw food being a fundamental aspect of that. Why, to kind of come back to what to really kind of echo, I think, everything we've talked about, why is it important through raw food and other means to strip down to nature's essence, return to nature, and get back to that kind of essential aspect of ourselves?
Well, I think the process of undomesticating ourselves is critical. You know, if you look at this, back to that whole topic about like cultural sobriety, you know, another way of saying it is that we're intoxicated by the domestication of the human species, right? And so we have been domesticated and conditioned by the world around us that is essentially we have dormant capabilities within us. We have a wild, ecstatic, uninhibited personality or possibility for expressing ourselves and our dreams that has been laid dormant. And my personal feeling is that, my experience is that when we get into a nutrition strategy that liberates us, and again, going back to that great Sanskrit quote, the subtle energies of our food become our mind. So when we start incorporating foods that literally give us subliminal messages that come from the earth, that haven't been denatured or disturbed through heat treatment or processing or anything, it actually informs our consciousness and changes our personality, and it causes us to become a more wild version of ourselves. And then eventually what starts to happen, every long-term raw foodist actually knows this because it happens all the time, where after a certain while of cleansing and re-nourishing yourself, if you're in a city, eventually you won't be in a city. Eventually you'll start to feel the wild call to get back into the wild. So you might end up exploring Hawaii, as I did. You might end up exploring like Sedona, getting into the Red Rocks and hiking and that kind of thing. You might get into the forest. You might, you're going to change your location. Your curiosity is going to start to turn on because there's this call to return to the wild. And I feel like most people, because of the domestication, they are afraid to actually get into nature. They're afraid to jump into an ocean. They're afraid to go barefoot on the earth. They're afraid to get direct sunlight to their skin. This kind of thing, right? It's really irrational when you think about it.
Yeah.
But when you override that program and you start to tap back into nature physically and metaphorically, it ignites a type of it ignites something within each one of us that's so natural and normal to us that we just kind of see through the veil. We start to see through the overall hologram program going on, and the things that used to be normal to us all of a sudden become abnormal, and we just basically regain our wild natural essence. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're right there.
We're going to have to schedule a follow-up. So many little roadways that we can't go down. But we have these 3 quick questions. I know you've got to run, so we'll fire those off right now, and then give you a chance to just sort of talk about what's happening now, your book, etc.
Awesome.
So the first question is, what book or books, up to 3, would you recommend that every human being should read?
Ooh, good question. So... okay, one of the books is a classic personal development book. I think it's the best book on personal development. It's a great book called As a Man Thinketh.
Oh yeah,
by the classic author James Allen. This book was put out in like the 1930s. This is my absolute favorite book on personal development. So I'd say As a Man Thinketh. Actually, you know what? We have the moment. Let me pull up a quote from that book real quick.
Sure.
Sure.
I actually have it here. Let me just find it real quick. Okay, so as you open that book, this is the passage that you see. Mind is the master power that molds and makes, and man is mind, and evermore he takes. The tool of thought in shaping what he wills brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret, and it comes to pass. Environment is but his looking glass.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. Nice. So that's number 1. Number 2, I would say I would love to nominate one of my books, but beyond that, the book that really inspired me to get into raw foodism as a practice was a book called The Sun Food Diet Success System by my friend and colleague David Wolfe.
Yeah.
And that's the single most inspirational book on health and nutrition out there. It's the number 1 book in my opinion, and just from an inspirational and motivational standpoint, it's very hard not to kind of get excited about the possibilities for life from reading that book. And that's actually the book that connected the dots originally for me about nutrition and transformation.
Nice. I'll have to, yeah, we'll have to read that.
I'm going to go get that now.
Yeah, and there's another book. It's right. I'm looking right at it, and on my podcast, I just had an interview with a man, Dr. Eben Alexander, and he wrote this book, Proof of Heaven.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very famous book right now. It's a New York Times bestseller. And basically, it's called Proof of Heaven, a neurosurgeon's journey into the afterlife. And Dr. Eben Alexander was a world-renowned neurosurgeon who basically, he believed in materialism and mechanistic science and everything that you're taught as a hardcore scientist, right? And he ended up coming down with a rare form of bacterial meningitis, which ate away his neocortex in his brain. So, which controlled like memory and cognition and all that. And to the point where he became kind of a study among other neurosurgeons because he was in a coma. Yet in his own words, he says that he was on a long odyssey into the reality of the afterlife.
Wow.
And I have to say that his story is the biggest confirmation for me of that particular truth. I'd say go on YouTube and look up like Dr. Eben Alexander, listen to one of his talks, because when you listen to him and his story, it's like, wow, okay, this is not like listening to someone talk about metaphysics. This is something else.
Yeah.
And he says that he's way more of a scientist now than he ever was, and he's on the completely other side, into quantum physics and and teaching people about his experience. But that would be the third book, Proof of Heaven.
That's cool, and we'll also link to your chat with him too. Throw some love to your podcast because it's a really good one. Second question from us. This is we'll see. This
Very
is interesting. Yeah. What's the best meal you've ever had?
Oh man, I've had a lot of amazing raw food meals, that's for sure. That's a tough one. Well, I'd say that if you're ever in Encinitas, then I'd say like going to this place called Peace Pies. Yeah, it's an amazing raw food restaurant, amazing dishes. I had one of their kelp noodle pastas, which was like off the charts. Their raw pizza is off the charts. I love their raw burger. And then there's also another place called Alok.
Where's that?
And there's one in Fountain Valley, which is Costa Mesa, California. Right. Yeah. And then there's one in downtown Los Angeles. And I have to say this, my dear friend Chef Ito is the main chef at that place. It's called Alok's, AULAC, and Chef Ito is a 15-year. Well, I mean, he's a Buddhist monk, but he has taken a vow of silence over the last 15 years. Wow! And he's held strong, and he's a raw foodist, and he basically makes the most amazing food. And but he's completely in a vow of silence, just as a way of life. And so you can tell when the food is created, there's some kind of energy and levity associated with the food. It's really amazing. So I don't know which meal was my favorite, but that's what comes to mind right now.
That's great.
It sounds powerful. I know. Third question is, what have you learned in the last 30 days that you think every person should know?
I'd say the number one thing that comes to mind right now is that you have to be willing to invest in yourself. The number one thing I see is that people are just too scared to actually make a big investment in themselves. And that is exactly what we have to do in order to get to the next level of our growth, get to the next level of our evolution, the next level of our business, the next level of our relationship. Whatever part of your life you want to experience exponential growth, you got to invest in yourself, and you got to invest big. Whatever that means, whether that's time, that's money, that's energy, that's whatever. You got to be able to take risks And the biggest risk is not investing in ourselves. The biggest, people think like, people think, what is it, like playing it safe or not putting all your cards on the table is the safe bet, but that's actually the biggest risk. Yeah. Not playing full out is the biggest risk. And it's part of that kind of paradox that reality, I think, is created out of. But because you do create your own reality and you can create your own luck, I believe that for me personally, the biggest thing for me is that unless I'm going to do something full out, there's no point in me doing it at all. That's where I'm at with it. If I can't do it full out, then forget it. Mm-hmm. It's not in alignment.
Yep, that's inspiring stuff, Ronnie. Okay, so I know you've got to run. So why don't you, before we close, just let people know where they can connect with you online and what's coming up for you. I know you've got a new book at the printers. Tell us all about that.
Cool. Yeah, well, people can find me at ronnielandis.net. That's my personal website. You can find more about my holistic nutrition certification program, which is holistichealthmastery.com. And then I also have my own podcast, so you can look up my name, Ronnie Landis, on iTunes, or maybe in your show notes, you might have a link to it. Yep. You can also go to my website, ronnielandis.net/podcast. And then my new book that's coming out very soon is called The Inner Alchemy Youthening Program, A Guide to Vitality, Beauty, and Longevity. And that comes out mid-May.
Got it. And people can order that through your site?
They can order that through Amazon. That should be available by early May, I think.
Okay. So about this podcast will be released in early-ish April, so that's in about a month.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then they could go to my website, get on my email list and all that, and get updated as well.
Yeah. Great. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes for sure. This has been amazing. Thank you, Ronnie. Really
super
a great pleasure.
Inspiring, Ronnie. A lot. We I know personally are taking away a lot for ourselves, so it's just fantastic. So happy to have you.
Yeah, this podcast is a ruse to just talk to really amazing people. Thank you for being part of
that's all having a podcast is. It's just you get to talk to amazing people that you admire, and then other people get to listen to it. So that's awesome.
Well, thanks, Ronnie. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Great.
All right, that's it for this week's Ownstream podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed our great interview with Ronnie Landis. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode for links to everything we mentioned, including Ronnie's website, his book, The Holistic Health Mastery Program, plus info on his upcoming book release, The Inner Alchemy Youthening Program, all the other books he mentioned, plus anything else we discussed. All of that can be found at ownstream.co/Ronnie Landis. That's ownstream.co/RONNIELANDIS.
Also, before we let you go, please sign up for our weekly tip-off email at ownstream.co and just click the sign up button in the upper right-hand corner. This is where we share each Monday 3 cool things we've learned in the last week in the areas of lifestyle, business, and spirit. This could be an amazing quote, individual tip, or tool designed to bring you more freedom and power in your life. So definitely sign up for that again at ownstream.co and just click sign up. Finally, we've just started our Facebook page. Please like us at facebook.com/Ownstream and be the first to know about new podcast episodes, new blog content, and cool stuff related to our personal journey. Also, we're on Twitter at Ownstream and on Instagram, where we post regularly at own_stream. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Ownstream podcast. To learn more and connect with us, please visit ownstream.co or follow us on Twitter at Ownstream and Instagram at own_stream.